Hi, welcome back. In my last few videos, I've been talking about the cognitive demand behind note reading. I shared the power that I've seen in starting beginner lessons with small note neighborhoods, and I discussed which 3 note neighborhoods are usually the best ones to start with. Today, I'd like to share with you a few ways that you can get more familiar with the little neighborhoods around your piano. I would also like to talk about the role of learning tools in your practice because they can also end up adding to the mental exhaustion and discouragement that we were talking about in a previous video, and we really don't want that in your piano journey. But first, let's start by talking about a few of the things that you can do to get more familiar with the little note neighborhoods around your piano. My first suggestion is for people who have stickers of all the letter names on their piano keys. Stickers are a really great way to help ease the mental burden when you're first learning piano because they identify the keys for you and they help you make less mistakes. But after a while, stickers can hold you back a little bit from learning your own way around the piano, especially if you don't have a plan on how you'll transition off of them. One way that you can transition out of using stickers that also supports your learning of note neighborhoods is to start by removing every other sticker on your keys. That way, you still have that tether to the correct notes and that feeling of security that having those stickers gives you, but you also start to identify some notes based on the notes around them, also known as the note neighbors. It's a pretty gentle way to learn your note neighborhoods. My own students tend to really like this approach because they don't feel pressured to remove all of their sticker supports at once, but they also get to practice a new skill, which is identifying notes on their own. My second suggestion is for people who are just getting started in reading music. I'm sorry that I'm going to repeat a point that I made in my last video, but it's just so important that to me it's worth sharing twice. In my experience, the very best way to learn the note neighborhoods is to practice reading music that focuses on one little neighborhood at a time. Unfortunately, most beginner piano books don't offer this. Most beginner piano books start the learner with a 5-note hand position, and while it may seem to make sense why we would learn a 5-note hand position to correspond with 5 fingers on the hand, this is actually the point where I start to see the wheels coming off for my students because their pace of learning music starts to exceed their pace of understanding the music. 5 notes at a time is too big of a note neighborhood for beginners to learn in any meaningful way. They spend all their mental energy simply reading these 5 notes, essentially in survival mode, trying not to make any mistakes, with no mental energy left over at all to notice anything extra about how these letters are relating to the other letters around them. When I noticed this, I started getting very frustrated with the beginner piano books I was using because I felt like they had lost track of what it feels like to be a true beginner. And I was disappointed because I felt that these books were not taking advantage of what we know from educational research, which is that for learning to be effective, it has to feel safe. And a key way to make learning safe is to take a slow pace, possibly even slower than the learner thinks they need. I felt that for piano beginners to have enough mental energy to not just read the notes, but start noticing things about the notes, I needed to really simplify what I was asking them to do. So I started creating my own sheet music that offered a halfway point before reaching a full 5-finger position. I focused on the 3 note neighborhoods that I mentioned in my previous video, around middle C, treble clef G, and bass clef F. I find these neighborhoods require much less mental energy to learn and leave enough mental energy left over for the piano beginner to actually notice things about where these letters sit in relation to one another. If you're interested in trying out this sheet music, I'm including a sample on my website as a free download. I'll put a link to that in a pinned comment so that it's easy for you to find. If you try it, please let me know. My third idea is for people who already feel comfortable with the neighborhoods around middle C, treble clef G, and bass clef F, and are ready for more of a challenge. I found that several of my own students felt like they wanted to explore more of the staff, but didn't quite feel ready to read music across the staff. So for them, I created Note Neighborhood flashcards, and these have been helping my students a lot. These are a printable set of flashcards that let you quiz yourself on the notes above and below every letter in the musical alphabet, note on the staff, and key on the piano. They have been a huge hit, especially when I combine them with a bingo board. So maybe they'll be helpful for you too. If you'd like to try them out, I've turned them into a PDF with instructions on how to print them on a single or double-sided printer. I'll include a link to that as well in a pinned comment, so you can check that out if you like. Now, just a word about incorporating flashcards into your practice. I have seen a lot of advice to fit flashcards in at the beginning of your practice before moving on to the real work of playing piano. But I'd like to remind you of what we discussed in my previous video. Naming notes itself can be a very mentally demanding task, especially at the beginning of learning piano. And if we want our piano journey to be sustainable and long-lasting, we have to start thinking of our brain power as a limited resource. Try not to get too fixated on what your practice is supposed to look like. If naming notes is a mentally draining task for you, I don't think it's fair to pile that on top of another mentally draining task like playing piano. So this is just a friendly reminder to check in on yourself and your energy levels. And if you feel that you need to stop and rest after using flashcards, that by itself can be sufficient for your practice that day, okay? Thank you very much for joining me today. I hope that this little collection of videos gave you some insight into your piano journey, and I hope that the suggestions and resources that I've offered here help you. If you have any questions, or if you'd like to share a light bulb moment that you've had, I would really love to hear from you. Please reach out in the comments below. Have fun at your piano this week, and I'll see you next time. Bye.